In this video, we're going to look at how to use historical terms. Now, historical terms just means the words that we use in history to talk about the past. Okay, so these are words that we as historians use all the time. The first three words I'm going to show you are all to do with how we measure time. So these are the first three words: decade, century, and millennium. Now, a decade just means 10 years. So you've probably just been alive for around 1 decade and maybe a year or two after that as well. So that's what a decade is. A century means 100 years. If you've ever been to America, you'll know that they have cents as their money, like their pennies. There's 100 cents in $1. Okay, so cent means 100. So we can understand that century is 100 years. And millennium refers to 1,000 years. These are three key words that you'll have to remember in history, okay? And that you'll use quite a lot. So decade is 10 years, century is 100 years, and millennium is 1,000 years. Now, the other word that we're going to look at is chronology. Now, chronology means time order. It's when we put things in the order in which they happened. So if we wanted to put your day in chronological order or time order, we would start off with you having your breakfast maybe, then maybe having a shower, then maybe going to school, then coming back home, doing your homework, and going to bed. It wouldn't make sense to tell the story in any other order than from start to finish. We wouldn't start with you coming home from school and then talking about your breakfast, then talking about your day at school, then talking about getting up on the morning. It makes sense to keep things in time order. So chronology just means keeping things in the order in which they happened, from one event to the next event to the next event. Now, another word we're going to look at is bias. Now, bias is an opinion, so something that someone says that is one-sided, so you only see what their point of view is, and it's reached because of what you like or what you dislike. Now, the only way really to understand this definition is to look at a couple of examples. So this man here thinks that Captain America is the best film ever and no film is better than Captain America. Now, is that true? Well, it's very hard to tell, isn't it? I would say it's probably not true. And this man is biased because you can see he's dressed up like Captain America. He's a fan of the film. So of course he's going to say that it's the best film ever and that no other film is better than that. Let's maybe look at another example. This young man supports Manchester United, and because of that he said that they're the best football team in the world. Is that true? Well, I would say that he's biased. Because he supports the team, he's going to say that they're the best team in the world. So just to return to the definition, bias is any opinion that is one-sided and reached because of what you like or dislike. This young boy likes Manchester United, so he said that they're the best football team in the world. It's a one-sided opinion, and he's biased in what he's saying. Okay, so we've managed to do 5 of our key terms. Let's do one more key term: historical periods. Now, a historical period is a certain amount of time that we chop history up into. So we take a selection of years together and we say that is a period. Now, these aren't as strict as these. They're not like decades, centuries, or millenniums that are just a very strict set of years. So a decade would always be 10 years, a century would always be 100 years, and a millennium would always be 1,000 years. These are just something that we kind of group these years together because they have something in common. So here's a very famous example. We have a king and a queen, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and we judge their time to be similar because they were all Tudors. Okay, so this is a period of history known as the Tudors. Now, we might chop history up into other historical periods. For example, the Romans. We judge that to be a big historical period. Or the Victorians, a lot more recent. Okay, we judge these years to have something in common, this group of years together. so we group them into one historical period. Now, what might our years be known as, the years in which we're alive? Well, some people think they're going to be called the Information Age years, because we have computers, we have iPads, and we have a lot of business that relies on knowing information and being able to sell and trade information. So we might be known as the Information Age as a historical period in years to come. So a historical period is just a group of years together that have something in common, and we group them together and we say that is a historical period. Okay, so we've covered all 6 of our key terms. If you are struggling to remember any of them, go back to the beginning of the video, try and watch them through again, and because we're going to move to a little test now. So, what I'd like you to do is to take a pen and a piece of paper. You can pause the video now while you get that. Okay, once you've got your pen and paper, I'm going to put some words on the screen. Once the words appear on the screen, I'd like you to pause the video and write the definition. Okay, so our first word is going to be bias. What is bias? Pause the video and tell me if you can work out what bias is, if you can remember it. Okay, there's the answer to bias. Bias is an opinion that is one-sided and reached because of what you like or dislike. If you put that in your own words, that answer will still be correct, okay? As long as you've got something that's about it being a one-sided opinion and it being reached because of what you like or what you dislike. Okay, let's look at another term now. Let's look at decade. Okay, so pause the video and write down what a decade is. Okay, there's the answer. A decade is 10 years. So if you got that correct, well done. Let's move on to our next key term, millennium. Okay, so pause the video and write down what you think millennium is, what a millennium is. Okay, I hope you managed to get that. A millennium is 1,000 years. So if you got that, well done. Let's look at the next definition. A century. Can you remember what a century is? Pause the video, write it down on your piece of paper, and see if you can remember. And there's the answer. A century is 100 years. If you got that right, well done. We only have 2 more terms that we need to look at. So the next term we're going to look at is historical periods. Can you remember what a historical period is? If you can, write it down on that piece of paper now and pause the video. When you start the video again, I'll put the answer on the screen. Okay, so historical period is a certain amount of time that we chop history up into. Usually, if you remember, because it has something in common. So, for example, the Tudors, we judge that to be a historical period. And we only do that to make history easier to understand. That's why we do it. We don't do it to make it more complicated. We do it to make it easier to understand. Now, the last key term is chronology. Okay, so let's see if you can write the definition of that on your piece of paper. So pause the video now, and when you start the video, I'll put the answer on the screen. Okay, and that is the definition of chronology, time order, putting things in the correct order in which they happened in time. Okay, so that was quite a lot to deal with in that video. There were 6 new key terms to learn. I hope you managed to learn them. If you didn't, just go back to the start of the video and have another run through, because it's really important that you get these 6 key terms. If you got everything right though, well done. Even if you got most of them right, well done. You've managed to learn something today. But make sure you know all 6 of these words, because they're really important in history. Okay? Goodbye.